Hello and welcome to this week's episode of 10 Minutes On. I'm your host, Guy Burton. I'm a researcher by training and have taught in universities around the world. With this podcast, I take a story from the past week and step back from the headlines to provide some context and analysis. Less about breaking news, more about understanding what's happening and why it matters. Before we get started, a quick request. If you find this episode useful, do share it with others, friends, colleagues, anyone who might be interested. You can also help by leaving a review or rating on your podcast platform, and by subscribing to future episodes which come out every Tuesday. It also helps the podcast reach a wider audience. Now, to this week's topic, Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orbán. Specifically, we'll look at his recent clash with the European Union, the state of Hungarian politics ahead of the election on 12th of April, and more broadly, what Orbán's Hungary tells us about how modern political leaders can win power, reshape political systems, and potentially begin to lose control of them. So Orbán was back in the headlines this week, following a meeting in Brussels. At a European Council gathering on Thursday, he blocked a proposed €90 billion loan to the Ukraine. His justification centered on a dispute with Kiev over an oil pipeline that supplies Russian crude to Hungary and Slovakia via Ukrainian territory. Ukraine claims the pipeline was damaged by Russian strikes and argues that repairing it would effectively ease sanctions on Moscow by restoring a key revenue stream. The reaction from other European leaders was immediate and hostile. Germany and France expressed their frustration, while European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen made clear that the EU would find alternative ways to provide support to Ukraine. For many, Orbán's move also crossed a line, particularly as Hungary had previously agreed in December to allow the loan to proceed under conditions that limited its own liability. But Orbán's willingness to antagonize his partners in Europe is not new. He has been Hungary's dominant political figure since 2010 and is now the EU's longest-serving head of government. Over that time, he has combined an increasingly illiberal domestic agenda with a distinct form of Euroscepticism, one that seeks to challenge the EU from within rather than exit it altogether. In many ways, this tension between domestic control and external constraint is central in understanding what is often described as the Orbán model, a system that combines electoral legitimacy with deep institutional control, even while remaining embedded in the EU. To understand how he got here, it's worth briefly revisiting his political evolution. Orbán first emerged in the late 1980s as a liberal reformer, opposing Soviet influence and co-founding the Fidesz party. But after a poor electoral showing in 1994, the party shifted rightward. By 1998, Orbán was leading a conservative coalition government that began centralizing power, including limiting parliamentary oversight. After losing office in 2002, he returned in 2010 with a supermajority alongside the Christian Democrats, a position he has maintained ever since. That supermajority has been critical. It allowed him to rewrite the constitution, reduce the number of parliamentary seats, and redesign the electoral system in ways that favor his party. As a result, Fidesz has repeatedly secured large parliamentary majorities, even when its share of the popular vote has been well below 50%. This is one of the core mechanics of the system he has built, electoral legitimacy combined with institutional advantage. These institutional changes have been accompanied by a broader erosion of democratic standards. In 2010, Freedom House rated Hungary as free, with a score of 90 out of 100. By 2026, it had dropped to 65 and was classified as partly free. The decline reflects restrictions on media independence, pressure on universities and NGOs, and legal and administrative obstacles placed in the path of opposition groups, further reinforcing the durability of the governing system. Orbán's government has also pursued a strongly conservative social agenda. This includes anti-immigration policies, anti-LGBTQ+ legislation, and constitutional changes reinforcing traditional definitions of the family. At times, this has veered into more troubling territory, such as the sustained campaign against financier George Soros, which combined political hostility with rhetoric widely criticized as anti-Semitic. One consequence was the relocation of the Central European University from Budapest to Vienna. In foreign policy, Orbán has cultivated close ties with Russia's Vladimir Putin. At first glance, this is counterintuitive, given Orbán's early opposition to Soviet influence. But the relationship reflects a mix of pragmatism and political calculation. Hungary has deepened its energy ties with Russia, including long-term agreements with Gazprom, even as other European states have sought to reduce the dependence following the 2014 annexation of Crimea, and more decisively, the 2022 invasion of Ukraine. This relationship has become increasingly contentious within the EU. Orbán's positions often align with Moscow's interests, leading some to view him as a disruptive force, if not an outright proxy, within European institutions. Again, this reflects a broader pattern, leveraging external relationships to reinforce autonomy at home, even at the cost of friction abroad. At home, meanwhile, Orbán has sustained support through a consistent political strategy. Central to this is a populist narrative built on an us versus them divide. Initially, them meant post-communist elites and neoliberal reformers. Over time, it has expanded to include Brussels, migrants, liberal values, and various external actors. Regular national consultations on issues ranging from pensions to immigration have reinforced this framing, presenting the government as the defender of the Hungarian people against outside interference. What distinguishes Orbán from many other populists is that he operates from a position of entrenched power. He is not merely criticizing the system, he has reshaped it, using state institutions to reinforce his political project. The question now is whether that system is as resilient as it appears. Which brings us to the upcoming election on 12th of April. For the first time in years, there is a credible possibility that Orbán could lose. Polling suggests that support for Fidesz has declined from around 50% in 2023 and 2024 to roughly 39% by late February. Meanwhile, a new political force, the Tisza party, founded in 2024, has surged ahead. Its leader, Péter Magyar, currently leads Orbán by around 10 points in some polls. Tisza's rapid rise is tied to a political scandal in early 2024. President Katalin Novak resigned after pardoning a man convicted of covering up child abuse in a state-run institution. Public anger found an outlet not through traditional opposition parties, which remain weak, but through social media mobilization. Magyar, a former insider and the ex-husband of Orbán's justice minister, used this moment to launch his party and position himself as an anti-corruption candidate. Even so, a Tisza's victory is far from guaranteed. Hungary's electoral system still favors Fidesz, with constituency boundaries that allow it to win more seats with fewer votes. And Orbán's campaign is not aimed at optimism, but caution. A better the devil you know message, warning that change could bring instability, including the risk of being drawn further into the war in Ukraine. There are also clear demographic divides. Tisza is gaining traction amongst younger, urban voters, while Fidesz remains strong support amongst the older and rural populations. External factors may also play a role. Magyar has already accused Russia of attempting to influence the campaign through disinformation, including alleged deepfake videos. At the same time, international political currents, particularly the United States, continue to shape the broader ideological environment in which Orbán operates. Even if Orbán loses, however, expectations of a clean break would be misplaced. Magyar himself is a former Fidesz figure, and his program is relatively cautious. While he promises to tackle corruption, restore the rule of law, and rebuild relations with the EU and NATO, he has also signalled continuity in key areas, such as a slower reduction in dependence on Russia's energy, extended to 2035 rather than 2027 as the EU wants, and a cautious stance on Ukraine's EU accession. More fundamentally, without a supermajority, Magyar would struggle to reverse many of the structural changes Orbán has put in place. Any transition is therefore likely to be partial and contested rather than transformative, which raises a broader question. How durable is the system that Orbán has built, even in the face of electoral challenge? And indeed, what broader lessons can we draw from all of this? For the political right, Orbán offers a model of how to consolidate power. Weaken institutional checks, dominate the media landscape, and embed an ideological project across the state. Variants of this approach can be seen elsewhere, including in the United States under Trump, where debates around the administrative state and executive power echo aspects of the Hungarian experience. For opponents, the lesson is less encouraging. For years, critics have relied either on external pressure from the EU or on fragmented domestic opposition to counter Orbán. Neither has been sufficient. As some analysts have argued, Orbán's success lies in building a coherent political project that resonates across society. Challenging it requires more than resistance. It requires an alternative vision that can command similar breadth and loyalty. Moments of crisis can open space for such alternatives. The 2008 financial crisis helped Orbán return to power by discrediting the existing order. The question now is whether the current combination of political scandal, economic pressure, and shifting public sentiment marks a similar turning point, or whether the system he has built will prove more resilient. What is clear is that Orbán has not simply governed Hungary. He has reshaped it, and whatever happens in April, that legacy will endure. So I'm going to leave it there for this week. Thank you for listening. If you found the episode useful, do leave a review, share it with others, and consider subscribing for future episodes every Tuesday. If you have suggestions for topics or feedback, you can get in touch via my website, which is www.guyburton.net, or on social media. I'm present on both Blue Sky and LinkedIn. Thanks again for listening. I'll be back again next week with another episode of 10 Minutes On. Until then, have a good week and goodbye.